Hello and welcome to a new episode of Everything Phil Collins. Today we're talking about B-sides, the B-sides of Genesis. This has been a requested episode for maybe well over a year, and I've been hesitating because I really wanted to give some of these B-sides a fair listen because I don't listen to a lot of B-sides. Why? Because they're on the wrong side. No, just kidding. I don't listen to a lot of B-sides because they're not accessible. They're not on the albums, and oftentimes you have to dig for them. Some of them haven't even been officially released by Genesis, very few, but some of them are hard to find on vinyl or on Spotify. I think my biggest issue with B-sides is that I mentally separate them from the album. And because the band has officially deemed them not good enough to be on the album, I kind of just automatically think less of them because the band didn't include them. Now, that's not to say that they haven't been wrong in the past. And we have a big list of songs where they were wrong. So today we're going to look at the top 10 Genesis B-sides. As always, down in the comments below, I want to see your top 10 to see how we align. A big shout out to our Patreons for supporting the channel. And I mentioned this topic earlier this week in our Patreon group, and I got some feedback from them. And I'm happy to say we align a lot. I mean, there's one tune, for example, that I didn't get. I personally just didn't like. It's not on my list, and a lot of our patrons included it on their list, and so I feel bad about that. Maybe during this video, I'll quickly go and listen to it just to hear it again. Now, of course, I think I'm right and I think you're wrong, but at the same time, I will agree that this list is subjective, and I want to see your list down below. I also reserve the right to change my list at all times. In fact, one time we did a list, I changed it live, changed the order. That'll probably happen again. I would say anywhere between like number 6 and 10 or 6 and 11, they could be swapped around any given day. I also have some of the physical records here to show you for any time that I have a physical copy of one of these B-sides. Okay, let's dive in. It's too much talking here, too much talking. Okay, my top 10 list starting at number 10. And then afterwards, there'll be some songs you'll be like, Scott, why didn't you add these? Well, I'll let you know some of those like things I left off. Okay, starting at number 10, I'm going to include this. I could include this in my top 5, but it would piss off too many people. So I'm going to include Pigeons as my number 10. I personally like that tune. We did a review of it a couple months ago. That like constant drone on the banjolele or whatever that is. I like that. A lot of people don't like that. I quite like it. So I have no problem with Pigeons. I think it's a cool tune, and I'm just going to put it on my list, number 10. I don't think there's ever a time where I'm like, I need to go listen to that song. In fact, there's never a time where I feel like I need to go listen to this album. I recently picked this record up on blue vinyl, and then I think I paid $30 or $40 for it. And then I later found it for like $5. I found it so cheap. Here in Canada, it's like far more common than even the black. And I feel like I got ripped off. I'm an idiot. Okay, moving on to number 9 this is the hardest one to say. Nanaimo bars? Naminanu? Oh, I forgot. Oh, shoot. Wait, did I grab it? So this was a B-side to Keep It Dark. You can let me know if it was located anywhere else. This is an instrumental. And from the 80s onwards, we had a few instrumental B-sides from them. To me, this is like the most Brand X song, right? This to me sounds like Brand X. In fact, there are quite a few Brand X songs where Phil's singing, and sometimes he's singing gibberish. And so to me, this just sounds like Brand X, which I really love. So I love this kind of fusion style. If they were going for something that had never been done before on Abacab, and that was kind of the objective, the directive from the band, is to do something that didn't sound like Genesis. Well, this certainly didn't sound like Genesis. I also love that part in the biography or the story of Genesis where when Peter left, Phil was like, what if we just did an instrumental band? And everyone was like, shut up, Phil. But he was actually serious. And so we do get a lot of instrumentals in the future from Genesis, and I like it. But I don't love this tune. I think it is really cool. It doesn't bother me. It's kind of got like a hand-in-hand vibe to it a little bit. Yeah, I really like it. So it's number 9. One song that didn't make this list, I do believe, just because like if I had to include the instrumentals, this song is just like not that great of an instrumental, and that's Submarine from Man on the Corner. So spoiler alert, you're not going to hear Submarine on this list, but that's another goodish. It's a little boring, but it's a goodish instrumental. Number 8, I'll give you a clue. And this is a clue thanks to my friend George, who gave me this record. And I treasure this outtakes from A Trick of the Tail. And number 8 is called Beloved Summer, AKA It's Yourself. This is a beautiful song. Some of these B-sides, I would say the majority of these B-sides deserve to be B-sides. They're okay, but I think it's smart to have left them off. I think there's a lot of people out there who think that most of Genesis B-sides, especially in the Calling All Stations era, that some of these B-sides should have, or in the Wind era, that some of these B-sides should have been included on the album. I'm usually pretty content with what the band chose, aside from one or two as we get higher on the list. Like, it's a pretty tune. It's similar to Ripples or to Entangled. It's got this like intro from Los Endos, which is really interesting. This outtakes record is really cool because you hear like bits and pieces of other songs and how they say, okay, let's borrow this element. Let's finally create this song that we'd end up hearing on the album. And this is true for It's Yourself or Beloved Summer. I think this song just kind of suffers from being kind of meh. Like, it's not like overly beautiful. I do think Ripples is a better melody. I think that Entangled is a much better song than this. I could see that it comes from, now, am I wrong in thinking that this goes all the way back to Selling England, or that was this an idea from Selling England or The Lamb, or Selling England and then not used on The Lamb, then revisited again for this record and then it never made it? Am I right about that? You can let me know. Really cool outro, really long, nice instrumental Indian style outro. The chorus is really beautiful. The melody of the verses are so, but the chorus is really nice. I like it. It's on my list. I think it's probably going to be on your list as well. Moving on to number 7. This is one of my favorite tunes on this list. Well, why is it 7th then? I make no sense sometimes. Number 7 is Feeding the Fire. Now, if I'm not mistaken, when we interviewed my buddies from Tabletop Genesis, I believe we were talking about like best Genesis intro songs, like the first opening tracks. And we were talking about how Invisible Touch is a bad opening song. And regardless of whether you like the song or not, it's just not a great way to open that album. That album is richer and deeper than the pop song Invisible Touch gives it credit for. And so we were talking about what song would you open that album with. I personally think Tonight Tonight would be a good album opener, but I think it was Mike who said that Feeding the Fire would be a good opener, or at least he had mentioned it later on in our conversation. Anyway, I think that's kind of true. I would say Feeding the Fire should have been on this album. I would have put it on instead of Anything She Does. I think the reason that they didn't put this song on the album instead of Anything She Does is that, and it's probably commercially was a smarter decision, because Anything She Does was like comedic break for the album. Otherwise we would have had, I think I would have put it at the start of side B, but then we would have had like Feeding the Fire, Domino, Throwing It All Away is like a little sad, and then Brazilian. So it wouldn't have like, the album would have been a little dark, right? Because Land is dark and Tonight Tonight is dark and In Too Deep is sort of sad, and so is Throwing It All Away. And so it's like, it would be kind of just like a, I don't know, like mood-wise, it would be a bit of a dark record. Oh, by the way, do I have Feeding the Fire here? Yeah, I think it's the Land of Confusion. On the 12-inch here, it's the Land of Confusion. There's my 12-inch. It's the Land of the Confusion B-side. Boop, 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 boop. This is cool. This is a nice record to have. I mean, would I open Invisible Touch with Feeding the Fire? I think that would be cool. The only problem with that is it's long. And I feel like with Anything She Does and with Invisible Touch, they were being a little bit more appealing to the masses. And so if you open with this song and then into Invisible Touch, I personally think that would be great. So I agree with Mike on that, but I also think it would be a good opener for side B if they didn't feel the need to put like goofy songs on their records. You let me know what you think. Where would you put this on Invisible Touch? Would you include it on Invisible Touch, or do you think it's good as a B-side? I personally think it's like one of the catchiest B-sides. I find myself singing it quite often. Okay, moving on to number 6 is one of the ones of the best artwork here is this here, Do the Neurotic. That's a great tune. We don't have many instrumental B-sides on this list. Like I had mentioned, I left off Submarine, but I quite like it. I like Do the Neurotic. I do think it should be left off. If you put it on in addition to the Brazilian, I personally think the Brazilian is way better. But if you put it on in addition to the Brazilian, I don't know. I mean, it's a 9-song record. You could throw another one on there. I think I mentioned somewhere online, like the Brazil or Do the Neurotic would be cool. Like if it was truncated, if it kind of like bled into another song, like almost like a segue of some sort. But I'm okay with it being off. I mean, I think there's an application for B-sides where that it adds a bit of value to these 12-inch singles, especially back pre-internet, when it's like, I want to go buy this song and now I'm just going to get a bonus track. There's some cases where Genesis would be lazy and just say, here's a live version of Invisible Touch, or here's a live version of Firth of Fifth on the B-side of That's All, or here's Living Forever as the B-side to No Son of Mine. That's okay as a way to introduce people to other songs, but they often would do it with like not the biggest song, you know? Like I think I have a copy of Invisible Touch that has In the Glow of the Night as the B-side. Like I just don't know why they would do that. It seems weird to me. Having an unreleased track is kind of cool. And I think unreleased instrumentals are great. I like Do the Neurotic. You let me know what you think. Number 5, we got to go back to this. We got to go back to this spot, the Pigeon EP. And you guys are going to be mad that this is so low on my list, but it's Inside and Out. I think this is, okay, let's talk about what I think is fantastic about this song. First of all, the solo at the end when things get going and crazy is unbelievable. So beautiful, so cool. I think the melody of this song is unbelievable. When you look at all of kind of the soft songs like Many Too Many or Your Own Special Way or Ripples from that era, this is probably the best melody out there. I'll give you that. The lyrics are pretty heavy, pretty heavy. It reminds me, it's completely different subject matter, but Since I Lost You, you know, when a song is so heavy and carries such a strong message and has a story, right? Then it's like, I have a hard time. You could almost even say this about No Son of Mine. It's like, I have a hard time just focusing on the music and the melody because the lyrics are drawing me away. Now, some of you might like that. For me, it's just a little distracting. So when I hear this story, I find it sad and I find it difficult to enjoy the song because the story is so heartbreaking. And it also is weird too, like the big explosive outro. Anyway, that's why I have it low on my list. There's so many people who would include it on Wind and Wuthering. I just don't know. I completely disagree. I think Wind and Wuthering is so artistic and so British sounding into my ears. And just, it's a weird album and it's a beautiful album. I think Wind and Wuthering is perfect. I wouldn't put Pigeons on it. I wouldn't put Inside and Out on it. I wouldn't change anything at all about that record. I wouldn't take What Gorilla off. I wouldn't touch Your Own Special Way. I personally think that's fine. So that's just my opinion. For a lot of you, you might have this at your number 1. And I'm very curious. You let me know. Even though the verses of this song is okay, and I mean the big 12-string choruses, the big electric guitar, sorry, the big 12-string verses and the electric guitars, it's done very well. But I mean, this is probably one of their best choruses, right? Yeah, I think it's one of their best choruses, especially from that era. I guess one other thing I'll add too is like that synth solo is so crazy at the end and like just everything being upbeat. I think it would have been nice if they had used this, elsewhere. Like, I think it's probably too fast for Wind and Wuthering, but it would have been cool maybe if they had worked this into And Then There Were Three. I guess that's my conclusion. I think it should have been reworked for And Then There Were Three, because that outro is really cool. And it reminds me of And Then There Were Three a little bit. Okay, moving on. Number 4 is Evidence of Autumn. So I don't have the 7-inch of Misunderstanding, but as I understand, it's the B-side to Misunderstanding. It definitely has a Duke vibe. So obviously it's a Duke B-side. It has that CP70, but a lot of us would have heard it, especially a lot of us North Americans would have heard it on Three Sides Live, right? By the way, question to any of you Europeans out there, for the people who got a copy of Three Sides Live that had the 4th side being the older tracks, which then why would they call it Three Sides Live? Because it's literally 4 sides live. What did you guys think of when that album came out? I guess like I don't know, what was going on? Like, how did you guys hear the B-sides back then? I'm just kind of curious as to why there was 2 versions, one with extra live songs and then one with B-sides. I don't understand. Now, with the question of one of the things I forgot to do, I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to ask myself as well, of all of these songs that we've talked about so far and the ones we haven't mentioned yet, should these songs have been on the album? And I think it's a simple yes or no for most of them. Should this have been on Duke? I think it could have. Duke is a little bit bloated. I think you could have. I mean, you could have taken off Please Don't Ask, maybe, and put this on. But to me, this sounds like still a B-side. I personally don't think it's better than Alone Tonight or Man of Our Times. People are going to kill me for that, or Heath Hayes or Cul-de-sac. I mean, though this is similar to these songs. Is this a Tony Banks song? I think it is. I don't know. I just paused for a second and went back and listened to a bit more of it. Yeah, I think it is actually better than some of the tunes on Duke. So maybe I would have. Maybe I would have included this one. I think it's a beautiful song. I'm very, very, very impressed with this song. Like it a lot. Okay. Now we're moving into my top 3. Have I mentioned are we still missing some for you? I think we are. Number 3, and I don't have a copy of it here, is On the Shoreline. Is a song that was supposed to be on We Can't Dance. They got to the end of We Can't Dance and they were fighting a little bit, and they included Since I Lost You as opposed to On the Shoreline. Now the question is, should Since I Have Lost You been left off and On the Shoreline included? 100% yes. 100% yes. I mean, We Can't Dance is very close to a perfect record, in my opinion. And I think there's a few tracks that I would remove. There's a album title that I would change. Artwork is great. On the Shoreline would be really incredible to have it on the album. Now, where would you put it? Would you put it in the spot of Since I Lost You? Would it be a good penultimate track leading into Fading Lights? I could see that working. I think it could be a good album opener as well. I think On the Shoreline could open the album and then into No Son of Mine. No Son of Mine would make a really good track too, and it would make for a super strong intro. I'm not a diehard On the Shoreline fan. It's grown on me. And again, it's hard to be a diehard fan of any of these songs unless you've been listening to them for 20 or 30 years. And some of them you have been. But I mean, the fact of the matter is that for a lot of us, we've heard the albums 50 to 100 times more than we've heard these B-sides. Not too often that we put side 4 from 3 Sides Live on the turntable, as opposed to just listening to We Can't Dance all the way through. And so I'm far more familiar and comfortable with the songs on We Can't Dance than I am with On the Shoreline. But because of some of you and a lot of you talking up this song, I have listened to it quite a lot over the past couple of years, and I've really, really come around on it. And I really, really do like it. It's very complex. There's a lot of things going on. There's lots of different melodies and production elements to this song. I do think it deserves to be on We Can't Dance. I think it's a shame. I think I would cut Since I Lost You. The problem is that when it comes to making We Can't Dance a better album, we all differ. I've heard some opinions out there about cutting Tell Me Why or Hold On My Heart or cutting Never a Time. Those songs are my freaking favorite songs on the album, and I would be so devastated if you remove those Phil Collins classic mid-tempo songs. So we just don't agree. We don't agree. I personally would cut Jesus, He Knows Me, and I Can't Dance, but then the album wouldn't have been successful or as successful. So like we differ on this. That's okay. But I think we're all in agreement that On the Shoreline is a good song, and it's probably a better song than maybe a third or half of the album. I think an opener would be good. That da-na-na-na, that kind of big chimey sound is very cool. I think it would make a good album opener. I think there was maybe pressure in the pop era, especially since Shapes, to lead off with a hit single. And it certainly was the case in the 80s for people to drop the needle and to hear their most popular song, like Mama or Invisible Touch or No Son of Mine. So I do understand fearing that people maybe wouldn't get through the record. I don't know. I mean, they bought the record. So I think On the Shoreline would have been a better opener than No Son of Mine. Okay, moving on. Number 2, I'll give you a little clue here, is on this record here, and it is Twilight Alehouse. How did I say that weird? Alehouse. Sounds like that's like an American way of saying it. I really like this song. So it has that kind of soft, trespassy, early Genesis feel on the verses with Bell, and very, very beautiful. And Phil is very subtle. And then we have the big kind of bluesy rock choruses. Normally, I don't like that type of sonic juxtaposition in music, but I really like it here. I like my live recording from the Rarest Live. It is from the John Peel radio shows. Now, is it on that version? I believe is on the new BBC box set, not the vinyl version, but the CD version. And so that's how I mostly heard it. There is a really good high quality version from the archive. But I like the live version. I think it's really cool. It's a little rough around the edges. And I really like that song. I think it's a great tune. And I think it's one of the best early Peter Gabriel era B-sides. So that's just my opinion. But I think when I was doing some research, I think for a lot of you would agree that Twilight Alehouse is why do I keep saying Alehouse? Weird way of saying it. But yeah, please let me know what you think about that song and where you first heard it. And what's the story behind it, by the way? I didn't get time to kind of dig into it. What record was it for? Was it a Foxtrot, a B-side? And why didn't it make it? What was the story with that? Please let me know in the comments below. I probably have read that in one of the history books, but I'm forgetting now why that record was played so often live, or why that track was played so often live, but didn't make it on an album. Please let me know. And the number one song should be of no surprise to anyone who, it should be no surprise. It is such a phenomenal Genesis song. Top 10, top 20 Genesis song of all time, let alone their B-sides. And that is Match of the Day. I'm kidding. I got you there, didn't I? It's You Might Recall. What a beautiful song. Now, this is from the Abacab era, right? And I only know it from Three Sides Live. I don't know if it was on a B-side to anything. Was it on a B-side to Abacab, maybe? Now, how crazy is it that this song was taken off Abacab for Whodunit? And I've talked about this before. It wasn't the right decision in hindsight. Everybody knows that. This is a beautiful song. And it would have really elevated, I think, it would have added like one more pretty element to Abacab, because Abacab is kind of dark and brashy. And so I think it would have added like a little bit more of an accessible element to this album. But I think back then, when it was about making some sort of art rock, some sort of prog fusion new wave statement, as seen on the album cover, trying something crazy like Whodunit could have worked. And I mean, Mama was a weird thing and it worked. I Can't Dance was silly and it worked. Even big, bold statements like Supper's Ready was a risk and it worked. Same thing with The Lamb. So there's a history of them trying interesting things, weird things, and they work. And so it's not crazy to live in a universe where Whodunit was a hit or was admired by critics, but that didn't happen. That's not the universe we're living in. And instead, we lose out on having You Might Recall on Abacab. You Might Recall is phenomenal. I would say it's better than most everything on Abacab, with the exception of the title track, Abacab. But I think it's better than Me and Sarah Jane. I think it's way better than No Reply at All. I've done a review on the song. We're running out of time. I don't have much time to go into this. It is absolutely one of my favorite Genesis songs of all time. I came to it late, again, because I relegate B-sides as to being not that important, and I give more care and consideration to album tracks and to learning album tracks and to coming around on album tracks. But this is a song that should not be overlooked. It is by far the best Genesis B-side. I think a lot of you would agree. And it's one of the best Genesis songs of all time. Now, Genesis has done this thing often where there's like a good part of the song, like the intro is really good, like on another record, but then the rest of the song is so-so. Or the chorus is really splendid, but the verses are just okay. Like, in my opinion, that's Inside and Out. Like, the verses melody is just okay, but the chorus is phenomenal. You Might Recall is made up of like 4 or 5 different parts, like the opening riff, and then the verse, and then the pre-chorus, and then the chorus, and then the post-chorus. I don't know what's happening, but all of them are equally phenomenal. That's what I love about this song, is that you're hearing a new key, a new melody, a new idea in the song all the time, but it's better than the last. Sometimes I think artists and songwriters actually make the verses a little subdued and not that catchy so that the chorus shines brighter. You definitely can't say that about You Might Recall. All of it is catchy and all of it is exciting. And if it goes back to the opening riff, the dum, 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 you're okay. That's cool. You love it. The drums on this song are also really good. Before I let you go, and I want to see your list in the comments, but I do want to talk about some songs that I kept off my list. We're not going to talk about Match of the Day, don't worry. But some of you are going to say, okay, Scott, what about the Calling All Stations era? I'll tell you, I spent last night on YouTube, because they're not on Spotify, but I spent last night on YouTube listening to a lot of the songs. And I think there's a lot of good in there. For example, one of my favorites is Run Out of Time. The issue with that song, that's the one with the sax solo at the beginning. That song is like a U2 track. It's a really beautiful, slow, mid-tempo song, and I love it. I love it a lot. But the intro I don't like. And so there was way too many like asterisks in all of the B-sides. Banjo Man has some interesting elements, but then again, it's called Banjo Man, so I couldn't. Anything Now came close, but I didn't include it on my list. I'm sorry. There's a lot of cool stuff on there. I think that album could be reworked a little bit, but I'm just not overly crazy about the B-sides. Give me more time with those B-sides. And if you have one that you really want me to sit with, please let me know in the comments below. Some of you are also saying, Scott, where's Paper Late? It's not missing. It's in its proper spot. which is not on this list. What's the worst song not on this list? In my opinion, it's Hearts on Fire. Gosh, Hearts on Fire, that's a We Can't Dance B-side. Thank God it's a B-side. It should be a C-side. It is the worst Genesis song I've ever heard. It is like a combination. I mean, he's singing in like that accent again. It's like a combination of Illegal Alien and Anything She Does and Jesus, He Knows Me and Who Done It. Like, personally, I do not love Hearts on Fire. I would like to be on fire more than hear that song. There's another song called I'd Rather Be You, which is, it's okay, but I really don't like it. It's the B-side to maybe Invisible Touch sometimes. It's one of the Invisible Touch era B-sides, but not crazy about it. I know there's more out there. We ran out of time. Sorry for not including Vancouver. Vancouver is pretty, but it's just okay. To me, it kind of like, I get that it's kind of like a microcosm of the problem with And Then There Were Three. By the way, do we have any B-sides from the Mama album from Shapes? You know, sometimes when you have a lot of B-sides, it means that you can prune and make an album more refined. And I think we kind of have that with Invisible Touch. I think it's one of the reasons why that album is really great. I think it could have been greater, but there were a lot of B-sides from that. We have a lot of B-sides from Abacab. So does having a lot of B-sides for an album actually make the album better? I don't know if that's kind of true. I think as we got into them having their own studio, we just heard more B-sides, with the exception of Shapes. You have to let me know if I'm missing something from there. But when they had their own studio, they had more time to experiment and do some throwaway tracks like Submarine and do the Neurotic and that kind of stuff. Anyway, okay, thank you for watching. Let me see your list down below. Goodbye. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button for exclusive videos, behind-the-scenes content, and to have your say on future topics before I film. Have a look at our Patreon page. Thanks for watching.